"Mom, I can't believe we're finally celebrating." Ashley Thompson beamed at her family as they walked through the bustling streets of downtown Atlanta. The warm spring evening wrapped around them like a gentle hug, perfectly matching their joyful mood. She kept glancing down at her navy blue graduation dress, still hardly believing that her high school journey was coming to an end. Her father, James, couldn't stop smiling. His daughter's acceptance letter to Yale, complete with a full scholarship, had been framed and hung proudly in their living room just last week. "Well, sweetheart, you've earned every bit of this celebration. 4 years of straight A's, debate team captain, and now Yale. We couldn't be prouder." Lisa, Ashley's mother, reached over to straighten her husband's tie. "James, you're getting misty-eyed again," she teased, though her own eyes sparkled with pride. Ashley's younger brother Kevin tagged along, actually dressed up for once in a proper button-down shirt instead of his usual sports jerseys. Mason's Grill stood before them, its elegant brick facade adorned with twinkling lights and lush hanging plants. The restaurant had been the talk of the town since its opening 2 years ago, famous for its innovative take on Southern cuisine and sophisticated atmosphere. Getting a reservation had taken weeks, but Lisa had insisted. Her daughter deserved the very best. The family paused outside, taking in the scene through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Inside, crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over white-clothed tables. The soft murmur of conversation and gentle clinking of fine china drifted out whenever the door opened. Well-dressed couples and groups sat enjoying their meals, while attentive servers glided between tables with practiced grace. "I made the reservation 3 weeks ago," Lisa mentioned as they approached the entrance. "Under Thompson, party of 4. She'd called twice to confirm, knowing how exclusive the restaurant was. The host, a young man in a crisp black suit, stood behind a polished wooden podium, tapping away at a tablet. The moment they stepped inside, something shifted. The host's welcoming smile faltered, his eyes darting between them and then to someone behind them. His fingers hovered over the tablet, no longer tapping. Let me check on that reservation for you," he stammered, though Lisa could clearly see their name on the screen from where she stood. Ashley noticed too, her excitement dimming slightly. She'd experienced moments like this before, subtle changes in treatment that her parents had taught her to navigate with grace. James placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, a silent reminder of their family motto: "Hold your head high, keep your dignity." The temperature in the lobby seemed to drop as other staff members began casting furtive glances their way. A few nearby diners looked up from their meals, some with obvious discomfort, others with concern. The Thompsons stood straight and calm, though Lisa's hand found her husband's, squeezing it gently. "Is there a problem?" James asked quietly, his deep voice steady and professional, the same voice he used in the courtroom where he served as a corporate lawyer. "We have a confirmed reservation, and I'd be happy to show you the confirmation email." Before the host could respond, a man emerged from the back office. His expensive suit and authoritative stride marked him as someone in charge. George Mason, the owner, approached the podium with an expression that made Ashley instinctively step closer to her mother. The night they had planned so carefully, the celebration they had looked forward to for weeks, was about to take an unexpected turn. But in that moment, none of the Thompsons could have guessed that their experience would spark a chain of events that would change not just their lives, but their entire community. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with one of Mason's expensive steak knives, yet the Thompson family stood their ground with quiet dignity, embodying generations of resilience in the face of prejudice. What happened next would test their composure in ways they never expected, but it would also reveal the power of justice in the most unexpected places. In those few tense moments, as other diners began to take notice of the scene unfolding in the lobby, no one, least of all George Mason, realized that among the witnesses to this incident sat someone whose presence would turn this act of discrimination into a catalyst for change. The evening was about to become much more than just a graduation celebration. It was about to become a pivotal moment in the ongoing fight for equality and justice. George Mason stood before the Thompson family, his expensive suit perfectly pressed, but his expression was anything but welcoming. He glanced at the tablet, then back at the family, his lips pressed into a thin line. "I see there seems to be some confusion about your reservation," he said, emphasizing the last word in a way that made Ashley's stomach twist. "There's no confusion, sir," James responded calmly, pulling out his phone. "I have the confirmation email right here, and my wife called twice to verify." His voice remained steady, professional, the same tone he taught Ashley to use when facing difficult situations. "Stay calm, state the facts, maintain your dignity." Mason's eyes narrowed as he looked past them to the other diners who were now watching the scene unfold. "I'm afraid we're experiencing some technical difficulties with our booking system tonight." He lowered his voice, though not enough to prevent nearby tables from hearing. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at one of the establishments downtown. Something more suitable for your family?" Lisa felt her daughter stiffen beside her. Ashley, who'd just been named valedictorian of her class, who'd earned a full scholarship to Yale, who'd never let anyone make her feel less than worthy, was trembling slightly. Not from fear, Lisa realized, but from anger and hurt. "More suitable?" James repeated, his lawyer's mind already documenting every word, every gesture. "I'm curious what you mean by that, Mr. Mason. Could you please explain what makes your establishment unsuitable for my family?" His voice was calm but carried an edge that made several nearby diners shift uncomfortably in their seats. Mason's face flushed red. "Now, don't try to twist my words. We have certain standards here at Mason's Grill. Our regular clientele expects a particular atmosphere." He gestured vaguely at their attire, though the Thompsons were impeccably dressed, James in a tailored suit, Lisa in an elegant black dress, Ashley in her graduation outfit, and even young Kevin looking sharp in his dress clothes. A few phones had emerged from surrounding tables, their cameras discreetly recording the interaction. The host behind the podium looked increasingly uncomfortable, his eyes darting between Mason and the Thompsons. "Standards." Lisa spoke up, her voice clear and controlled. "We made a reservation weeks ago. We're here to celebrate our daughter's high school graduation and her full scholarship to Yale. We're dressed appropriately, we have a confirmed reservation, and we're ready to pay for our meals. What standards exactly are we failing to meet, Mr. Mason?" The restaurant had grown quieter, the usual dinner chatter dying down as more people turned to watch. In the corner, a man in a business suit paused with his fork midway to his mouth, his attention fully focused on the scene unfolding by the entrance. Mason's composure cracked further. "I don't have to explain myself in my own establishment. We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone." His voice rose with each word. "And right now, I'm refusing service to you. Please leave before I'm forced to call security." Kevin, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. "But that's not fair. We didn't do anything wrong." The 14-year-old's voice cracked with emotion, making the situation even more heart-wrenching for those watching. A couple at a nearby table stood up, leaving their half-finished meals. "We'll be leaving too," the woman announced loudly. "We don't support establishments that discriminate." They weren't the only ones. Several other diners were reaching for their coats, their faces showing disgust at Mason's behavior. But Mason was too far gone in his anger to notice the impact of his actions. "I want you out of my restaurant now," he practically shouted, pointing at the door. "You're disturbing my customers, and I won't have it." Ashley, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation, finally spoke. Her voice was clear and strong, carrying across the now hushed restaurant. "No, Mr. Mason. You're disturbing your customers with your prejudice and hate. We'll leave, but not because we don't belong here. We'll leave because no meal is worth sacrificing our dignity." The family turned to go, their heads held high despite the humiliation. As they walked out, they heard chairs scraping and murmurs of disapproval directed at Mason. What they didn't see was the man in the corner finishing his tea with deliberate slowness, his eyes never leaving Mason as he pulled out his phone and made a quick call. Outside, the warm evening air had lost its celebratory feel, but the Thompsons stood together, supporting each other as they always had. What they didn't know was that their dignified response to hatred would soon spark a chain of events that would shake Mason's world to its core. Sometimes justice comes from unexpected places, and tonight it was quietly taking notes over a cup of tea. The walk to their car felt like the longest of their lives. Ashley clutched her brother Kevin's hand, feeling him shake with anger and hurt. The beautiful spring evening that had held so much promise now seemed tainted, the warm breeze carrying the sting of humiliation instead of celebration. "I don't understand," Kevin kept saying, his voice small and confused. We did everything right. We dressed up, we had a reservation, we were polite. Lisa pulled her son close, wishing she could shield both her children from the harsh realities they just faced. James stood by their car, keys in hand, but didn't unlock it yet. 20 years as a corporate lawyer had taught him to document everything important. "Everyone, take out your phones," he said quietly. "Write down everything you remember while it's fresh. Times, exact words used, descriptions of who was there." His family knew this side of him, methodical, precise, turning pain into purpose. As they documented the incident, other diners began leaving the restaurant. A few approached the Thompson family, offering words of support and their contact information as witnesses. "What happened in there was wrong," said an elderly woman, her hands trembling with emotion as she wrote down her phone number. "I've lived in this city for 70 years, and I won't stay quiet about this." Inside Mason's Grill, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. The usual elegant dinner service had given way to tense whispers and the sound of chairs scraping as more customers asked for their checks. But one table remained occupied. Michael Chen, the city's new commissioner of public health and safety, sat finishing his meal with deliberate slowness. Chen had moved to Atlanta 6 months ago, bringing with him a reputation for transforming city departments and a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. He'd chosen Mason's Grill tonight specifically because of whispered complaints that had reached his office, complaints that had never led to formal action because people feared retaliation. As he observed the restaurant's operations, Chen noted every detail with the precision that had made him famous in his field. He watched as Mason stormed back to his office, saw the uncomfortable looks exchanged between staff members, noticed how some servers seemed to linger longer at certain tables while rushing through service at others. Outside, Ashley finally broke down in tears, not of weakness but of frustrated anger. "I worked so hard," she said, her voice catching. 4 years of perfect grades, debate team captain, volunteer work every weekend. And none of that mattered to him. He took one look at us and decided we weren't good enough. Lisa wiped her daughter's tears, her touch gentle but her voice firm. "No, honey. He showed everyone that he wasn't good enough. Your achievements, your character, your dignity, those shine brighter than any fancy restaurant's chandelier." A small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk, many of them former diners who'd walked out in protest. Someone had posted a video of the incident online, and it was already gaining traction. Phones buzzed with notifications as the story spread across social media platforms. Back inside, Commissioner Chen finally stood up. He adjusted his tie and walked to the host's podium, placing his business card on the polished wood. "Please make sure Mr. Mason gets this," he said quietly. "Tell him he can expect a visit from my office first thing tomorrow morning." The host's eyes widened as he read the card. "Ah, yes, sir, Commissioner," he stammered, suddenly understanding the significance of what had transpired. Meanwhile, the Thompson family had made a decision. Instead of letting their evening be ruined, they drove to their favorite local diner, a place where Ashley had spent countless hours studying over cups of coffee during her high school years. The owner, Mrs. Park, took one look at their faces and their fancy clothes and immediately cleared her best booth. "Whatever happened, your family here," she said firmly, bringing them her special homemade cake. "And we celebrate family." Other regular customers, sensing something was wrong, began stopping by their table with congratulations for Ashley's graduation. Soon, the diner buzzed with warmth and genuine celebration. "You know what?" Ashley said, managing a small smile as she looked around at the familiar faces and genuine kindness surrounding them. "This is better than any fancy restaurant. This is real." Kevin nodded enthusiastically, his earlier distress fading as he dug into a giant slice of chocolate cake. But as the Thompson family found comfort in their community's embrace, they didn't realize that their experience would soon become the catalyst for major changes in their city. Commissioner Chen was already making calls, setting things in motion that would ensure what happened at Mason's Grill wouldn't be forgotten or repeated. The night ended differently than they'd planned, but with an important lesson. Sometimes the worst moments bring out the best in a community, and real change often starts with one family brave enough to stand their ground with dignity and grace. By sunrise the next morning, the video of the incident at Mason's Grill had spread like wildfire across social media. Local news vans parked outside the restaurant, their cameras capturing the "closed for private event" sign hastily posted on the door. But the real action was happening inside Commissioner Chen's office at City Hall. Chen sat at his desk, surrounded by stacks of files and a team of investigators. His computer screen showed dozens of emails from former customers and employees of Mason's Grill, each sharing their own experiences of discrimination. The incident with the Thompson family had broken the dam of silence. "Look at this pattern," Chen said, pointing to a spreadsheet one of his analysts had compiled. Reservations mysteriously cancelled, tables unavailable despite being empty, certain customers always seated near the kitchen or bathrooms. His team nodded, taking notes as they built their case. A knock on the door interrupted their discussion. "Commissioner," his assistant called, "the health department's previous inspection records for Mason's Grill just arrived." Chen opened the folder and frowned. The restaurant's spotless inspection history seemed too perfect, especially given the complaints now flooding in. "Get me former Inspector Rodriguez on the phone," Chen instructed. Within minutes, they were speaking to the recently retired health inspector. "Sir, I need to know if there's anything about Mason's Grill that concerned you during your inspections." The old inspector's voice crackled through the speakerphone. "I tried reporting it multiple times," he sighed. "Mr. Mason always had an envelope ready when I arrived. I documented everything, but my supervisor back then, well, let's just say the reports never made it to the final records." Meanwhile, across town, James Thompson sat in his home office working the phones. His colleagues from the legal community had rallied around him, offering support and resources. "We've got 15 former employees willing to testify," his paralegal reported, "and more coming forward every hour." In the kitchen, Ashley scrolled through her phone, reading messages of support from classmates and teachers. The video had reached her future dean at Yale, who sent a powerful message. "Your dignity in the face of discrimination embodies the values we seek to foster. We're proud to have you joining our community." Lisa fielded calls from civil rights organizations offering their support, while Kevin updated the family on the growing social media response. "Mom, people are sharing their own stories now. It's not just about us anymore." Back at Mason's Grill, the staff arrived to find Commissioner Chen and his team conducting a surprise inspection. The commissioner moved methodically through the kitchen, noting every violation that previous inspectors had mysteriously overlooked. In the office, his team discovered employment records showing a clear pattern of discriminatory hiring practices. "Sir," one investigator called out, holding up a stack of papers found in the bottom drawer of Mason's desk. "These appear to be altered financial records." Chen examined the documents, his expression grim. What had started as a civil rights investigation was now uncovering layers of financial misconduct as well. Outside, former employees gathered, sharing stories with reporters. A young waitress spoke tearfully about being forced to give certain customers poor service on Mason's orders. A former host described the coded language used to identify undesirable guests in the reservation system. The investigation team's phones buzzed constantly with new tips. Security camera footage from the restaurant revealed countless instances of discrimination, carefully documented by Chen's team. Each piece of evidence strengthened their case. By afternoon, social media had given the incident a hashtag. #MasonsDiscriminates. People shared their own experiences of discrimination at restaurants, turning one family's horrible evening into a nationwide conversation about ongoing racism in the service industry. In their living room, the Thompsons watched the news coverage together. "I never wanted all this attention," Ashley admitted, leaning against her mother. "But if it helps stop this from happening to someone else." "That's exactly right," James said, putting down his phone after another call with their legal team. "Change doesn't happen in silence. Sometimes it takes one moment, one family story, to shine a light on problems people have been ignoring for too long." The day's revelations had transformed a single act of discrimination into something much bigger. Commissioner Chen's investigation was uncovering years of systematic discrimination, health code violations, and financial irregularities. Mason's carefully built facade was crumbling, revealing the rot beneath the elegant exterior. As evening approached, Chen called a meeting with his team to review their findings. "This isn't just about one night or one family anymore," he told them. "This is about years of institutional discrimination and corruption, and we're going to make sure it stops here." The investigation was far from over, but already it was clear that Mason's Grill would never be the same. What George Mason didn't realize when he turned away the Thompson family was that his actions would trigger not just the end of his restaurant, but the beginning of a larger movement for change in the city's restaurant industry. Outside City Hall, a small crowd gathered for an impromptu candlelight vigil, sharing stories of discrimination they'd faced and standing in solidarity with the Thompson family. The night ended as it had begun, with people coming together, but this time not in anger or hurt, but in hope for genuine change. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Commissioner Chen's conference room, where his team had worked through the night. Coffee cups and takeout containers littered the table, evidence of their dedication to uncovering the truth about Mason's Grill. "Commissioner, you need to see this," called out one of his analysts, waving a stack of papers. "We've found a pattern in the reservation system. There's a special code that was used to flag certain customers." Chen leaned over to examine the documents, his expression hardening as he read. The code, they discovered, wasn't just used for the Thompson family. Hundreds of reservations over the past 2 years had been marked, then mysteriously cancelled or shifted to undesirable time slots. The discrimination ran deeper than anyone had initially suspected. Across town, the local news station was interviewing former employees who'd come forward. A former bartender spoke with tears in his eyes. "I quit after 3 months because I couldn't take it anymore. Mr. Mason had different drink prices for different customers. He thought we didn't notice, but we all knew what he was doing." In their kitchen, the Thompson family watched these revelations unfold on TV while eating breakfast. Kevin looked up from his cereal. "Dad, is this why you always taught us to keep records of everything?" James nodded, remembering all the times he'd insisted on saving receipts, taking photos, documenting interactions. "Speaking of records," Lisa added, checking her phone, "the civil rights attorneys want to meet with us today. They say more families have come forward with similar experiences." Ashley, who'd been quiet, squeezed her mother's hand. Her Yale acceptance letter hung on the fridge, a reminder that dignity couldn't be taken away by anyone's prejudice. Back at Mason's Grill, health inspectors combed through the kitchen, finding violations that had been hidden during previous inspections. Behind a false wall in the storage room, they discovered improperly stored food and evidence of pest problems, all carefully concealed during regular inspections. "Look at these dates," one inspector called out, examining boxes of expired ingredients. "Some of these should have been disposed of months ago." The violations mounted, each discovery adding to the growing case against the restaurant. Commissioner Chen's phone rang. It was the city's legal department. "We've reviewed the evidence," the city attorney reported. "This goes beyond civil rights violations. We're looking at health code violations, tax fraud, and possible bribery of former inspectors. We're preparing to file charges." Meanwhile, social media couldn't get enough of the story. Food bloggers began sharing their own experiences of discrimination in the restaurant industry. #Mason's Discriminates had evolved into #ServingQuality, sparking a nationwide conversation about making restaurants truly welcoming to everyone. Local restaurant owners, wanting to distance themselves from Mason's behavior, began posting their non-discrimination policies prominently in their windows. Some went further, organizing diversity training for their staff and reaching out to community leaders for guidance on creating more inclusive environments. In the afternoon, the Thompsons attended a community meeting at their local church. The room was packed with people sharing similar stories, not just about Mason's Grill, but about discrimination they'd faced in various establishments. Ashley's story had given others the courage to speak up. "We thought we were alone," one elderly gentleman said, standing up to share his experience. "We stopped going out to nice restaurants years ago because we got tired of the looks, the poor service, the excuses about lost reservations. But not anymore. Now we know we have to speak up." Commissioner Chen arrived at the meeting, taking time to listen to each person's story. His team recorded testimonies, building an even stronger case. But Chen wasn't just thinking about Mason's Grill anymore, he was drafting proposals for new city-wide regulations to prevent discrimination in all public establishments. As evening approached, George Mason finally emerged from hiding, holding a press conference outside his restaurant. His prepared statement rang hollow. "This is all a misunderstanding. We welcome everyone at Mason's Grill." The crowd's skeptical murmurs were interrupted by a former employee stepping forward with years of detailed notes documenting Mason's discriminatory practices. The press conference quickly turned into chaos as reporters fired questions about the mounting evidence. Mason's lawyer tried to end the conference, but the damage was done. His client's attempts at damage control had only made things worse. Back in the Thompsons' living room, the family gathered to review documents with their legal team. "This isn't just about us anymore," James said, looking at the growing stack of evidence. "This is about making sure no other family has to go through what we experienced." Ashley, doing homework at the kitchen table, looked up. "You know what's amazing? In Debate Club, we talked about how change happens. Sometimes it takes one small moment to bring attention to a much bigger problem. That's what's happening here, isn't it?" Lisa smiled at her daughter's insight. "That's exactly right, honey. And look at all these people coming together to support each other and demand better. That's how real change starts." The day ended with Commissioner Chen making one final call to his team. "Tomorrow, we move forward with formal charges. Mason's Grill was just the beginning. We're going to make sure every restaurant in this city understands that discrimination has no place in our community." As night fell, the Thompson family sat together on their porch, finding strength in each other and in the knowledge that their experience was helping to create positive change. Sometimes, the worst moments can lead to the best outcomes, not just for one family, but for an entire community ready for change. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and community members on the morning of the hearing. George Mason arrived wearing an expensive suit that couldn't hide his nervousness. His restaurant had been closed for 2 weeks now, ever since Commissioner Chen's investigation revealed the full scope of violations. Inside the courtroom, the Thompson family sat with their attorneys, watching as evidence was presented. James held Lisa's hand as photos, videos, and documents flashed across the screen. Each piece of evidence told part of a larger story, one of systematic discrimination that had gone unchecked for years. "Your Honor," the prosecutor began, "what we have here isn't just one incident of discrimination. We have evidence of years of systematic bias, health code violations, tax fraud, and attempted bribery of health inspectors." The judge listened intently as surveillance videos played, showing countless instances of discriminatory treatment. Former employees took the stand one by one. A former host described the coded system used to mark undesirable reservations. "Mr. Mason told us to say the computer was down or claim the reservation was never made," she testified, her voice shaking but determined. In the gallery, Kevin whispered to his sister Ashley, "Look at Mason's face." The restaurant owner's confident smirk had disappeared as more evidence mounted against him. His expensive defense lawyers shuffled papers nervously, their usual strategies useless against such overwhelming proof. Commissioner Chen testified next, presenting his team's findings. "Our investigation revealed a pattern of discrimination that extended beyond seating arrangements," he explained, showing charts and graphs. Different prices were charged for the same dishes. Health violations were deliberately hidden. False tax records were maintained. During a break in the proceedings, the courthouse hallway buzzed with conversation. Local restaurant owners who'd come to watch discussed changes they were making in their own establishments. "We're implementing new training programs," one owner told reporters. "We want everyone to feel welcome in our restaurants." Back in session, Mason's defense crumbled further as financial records were presented. The judge's expression grew increasingly stern as evidence of tax fraud and bribery emerged. What had started as a discrimination case had uncovered a web of criminal behavior. Outside, a crowd gathered in support of the Thompson family. People held signs reading "Stop Discrimination" and "Justice for All." Food trucks lined the street, their owners offering free meals to show solidarity. The community had turned what could have been just another court case into a movement for change. Ashley noticed a group of her Yale classmates-to-be who'd driven down to show support. They wore Yale sweatshirts and carried signs reading "Yale stands against discrimination." Their presence reminded everyone that this case had gained national attention. The prosecution's final presentation included testimony from dozens of customers who'd faced similar discrimination at Mason's Grill. Each story added weight to the case, showing that the Thompson family's experience was part of a larger pattern. Your Honor, the prosecutor concluded, this isn't just about one family being turned away from a restaurant. This is about years of systematic discrimination, fraud, and disregard for public health and safety laws. We're asking for the maximum penalties under the law. Mason's lawyer attempted to paint his client as a misunderstood businessman who'd made a few mistakes. But the evidence was too strong, the pattern too clear. The judge's patience visibly wore thin as the defense tried to minimize years of documented discrimination. During the final break, Lisa hugged her children. "No matter what happens," she said, "you've shown incredible strength. Your dignity in the face of discrimination has inspired others to speak up." Ashley nodded, thinking of all the messages she'd received from people sharing their own stories. Commissioner Chen approached the family. "Your courage in coming forward has helped us uncover problems that went far beyond one restaurant," he told them. "Because of you, we're implementing new policies to prevent discrimination across the city." The courthouse fell silent as the judge prepared to announce her decision. Mason stood with his attorneys, his usual arrogance replaced by visible worry. The Thompson family held hands, their quiet dignity a stark contrast to Mason's nervous fidgeting. "In all my years on the bench," the judge began, "I've rarely seen such clear evidence of systematic discrimination combined with flagrant disregard for public health and safety laws." She paused, looking directly at Mason. "This court cannot and will not tolerate such behavior." The sentencing was comprehensive. Heavy fines, mandatory anti-discrimination training, and probation for Mason. His restaurant's licenses were permanently revoked, and he was barred from operating any food service establishment in the state. Additionally, he was ordered to pay substantial damages to affected customers. As the court adjourned, the Thompson family emerged into the sunlight to cheers from the crowd. Local restaurant owners approached them with handshakes and hugs, many promising to work together to create more inclusive establishments. "This isn't the end," James told reporters. "It's just the beginning of making sure every restaurant in our city is truly open to everyone." Lisa smiled, watching Ashley and Kevin talking with other young people about their hopes for change. The day ended with a community celebration at a local park. Food truck owners, restaurant workers, and families came together, sharing meals and stories. What had started with one family's terrible experience had grown into a movement for lasting change in their community. 6 months after the courthouse verdict, the former Mason's Grill building looked completely different. Gone were the stuffy curtains and dim lighting, replaced by bright windows and welcoming decorations. The new sign read Unity Kitchen, and the line of customers stretched around the block for its grand opening. The new owners, a group of local restaurant workers who'd pooled their savings, had transformed the space into something special. "We wanted to create a place where everyone feels at home," explained the head chef, who'd once worked as a dishwasher at Mason's Grill. "Good food brings people together." Inside, the Thompson family sat at a special table near the window, the same spot where they'd been turned away months ago. Ashley, home from her first semester at Yale, couldn't stop smiling at the transformation. "It's like a different world," she said, watching the diverse crowd of customers enjoying their meals. Commissioner Chen had helped the new owners navigate the permit process, ensuring everything was done properly. His office had implemented new regulations requiring all restaurants to post clear non-discrimination policies and undergo regular cultural sensitivity training. Regular surprise inspections helped ensure these weren't just empty promises. "Look at this menu," Kevin exclaimed, pointing to the dishes that celebrated different cultures and traditions. The new owners had created a fusion cuisine that reflected their community's diversity. Even better, they'd started a program to train young people from underprivileged backgrounds in restaurant management. Lisa watched as former Mason's Grill employees, now part owners in the new restaurant, confidently served customers. The transformation wasn't just about the building, it was about the people. Many who'd once stayed quiet about discrimination had found their voices and were making sure others felt welcome. James chatted with other diners, including some who'd been witnesses at the trial. The case had sparked changes across the city. Other restaurant owners had examined their own practices, making changes to ensure true equality in service. Some had even started scholarship programs for aspiring chefs from diverse backgrounds. Ashley's story had reached far beyond their city. Her Yale professors used the case in their business ethics classes, and she'd been invited to speak at conferences about creating inclusive spaces. But the best part, she told her family, is seeing how many people now feel comfortable going out to eat without fear of discrimination. The settlement money from the case hadn't just lined anyone's pockets. The Thompsons had created a foundation to help minority students pursue careers in hospitality management. Their first group of scholarship recipients included Kevin's classmate, who dreamed of opening his own restaurant someday. Community leaders gathered at Unity Kitchen that evening to celebrate 6 months of change. The mayor praised the Thompson family's courage and announced new citywide initiatives to combat discrimination. Local business owners shared stories of how their own practices had improved. "Remember when we just wanted to celebrate my graduation?" Ashley laughed, looking around at the packed restaurant. Her mother squeezed her hand, remembering that painful night that had led to so much positive change. Commissioner Chen stopped by their table, bringing news that other cities were adopting similar regulations after seeing their success. "Your family's stand against discrimination has created ripples far beyond our city," he told them. "Sometimes it takes one moment of courage to start real change." The evening's special moment came when the new owners unveiled a small plaque near the entrance. It told the story of what had happened there, not to dwell on past wrongs, but to remind everyone that positive change is possible when people stand together against discrimination. Young staff members, participants in the restaurant's training program, served dishes with pride and professionalism. Many had faced their own struggles with discrimination, but here they found opportunity and respect. The restaurant had become more than just a business. It was a symbol of transformation. Kevin, who'd been quietly observing everything, suddenly spoke up. "You know what's cool?" Mason thought he was so powerful, but in the end, his discrimination brought people together to make things better. His family nodded, understanding the wisdom in his words. As the celebration continued, more people shared their stories. An elderly couple spoke about finally feeling welcome in upscale restaurants. A young chef described how the new training programs had given her a chance she'd never had before. Each story added to the larger narrative of positive change. The night ended with a community dinner where everyone sat together, sharing food and conversation. The barriers that had once divided people were breaking down, replaced by understanding and respect. Unity Kitchen had become more than just a restaurant. It was proof that justice and compassion could transform a community. Outside, the sunset painted the sky in beautiful colors as families left the restaurant, already planning their next visits. The Thompson family stood together, looking at the place that had changed from a symbol of discrimination to a beacon of hope. Sometimes, Ashley said, hugging her parents and brother, the worst moments lead to the best changes. We just have to be brave enough to stand up for what's right. The lights of Unity Kitchen glowed warmly behind them, welcoming everyone to a new chapter in their community's story.